You look down and your arm is open, really open. Blood is running down to your fingers in a warm, steady line, and it is not slowing. No ambulance, no stitches, no sterile gauze, no one coming with a trauma kit. For most of human history, this was the first problem with a serious wound. Keep the blood inside the person. And the useful answer is surprisingly simple. Ancient humans did not need to understand clotting. They needed to slow the bleeding long enough for clotting to work. Pressure is boring. It is also useful. Push hard on a wound, and you compress damaged vessels, reduce blood flow, and give the body's clotting system a better chance to seal the leak. That principle does not depend on modern medicine. Hands can do it. Cloth can do it. A strip of hide can do it. Anything that lets you maintain firm pressure can buy time. But pressure has limits. A wound can be too deep. A vessel can be too badly damaged. Blood can be coming out faster than the body can replace it. Some injuries were simply unsurvivable. That part matters. Ancient humans did not have a secret trick that made catastrophic bleeding safe. A severed major artery could still end a life very quickly. But archaeology shows something else too. Some people survived enormous injuries. Shanidar I is one of the clearest examples. He was a Neanderthal who lived tens of thousands of years ago in what is now Iraq. His skeleton shows severe injuries and long-term disability. One arm was badly damaged and much of the lower right limb was lost or severely atrophied. He also had damage around the face and eye, and other physical problems that would have made life difficult in a mobile hunter-gatherer group. And yet he survived for years, probably much longer. His bones healed. That tells us something important. It does not tell us exactly how his bleeding was stopped. Bones have an annoying limitation. They can show us that somebody survived. They cannot show us the hands pressing on the wound in the first 5 minutes. They cannot preserve the strip of hide. They cannot preserve the exact position of the body, the pressure, the packing, or the person helping. So Shanidar is not proof of a specific prehistoric first aid technique. He is proof that severe trauma did not always end immediately in death. Somehow, the person got through the first crisis. Then came the second problem, keeping the wound closed. Once written medical records appear, we finally get clearer evidence of what people were actually doing. The Edwin Smith Papyrus, an Egyptian surgical text copied around 1600 BCE from older medical traditions, describes practical treatment of traumatic injuries. Examine the wound. Bring edges together when appropriate. Use dressings. Close certain wounds with sutures. This is much later than the Paleolithic world. So we should not pretend Neanderthals were following an Egyptian surgical manual. But it shows something important about human wound care. By the time medical procedures were being written down, people had learned that a wound could be mechanically managed. Hold it closed. Dress it. Protect it. Let the body do the repair. Later historical medicine also used cautery, applying heat to tissue to control bleeding or destroy damaged tissue. It was brutal, sometimes useful, and very different from precise electrocautery of a modern operating room. Whether prehistoric groups regularly use heat specifically for hemorrhage control is much harder to prove. The written evidence comes much later. So the safest thing to say is simple. Humans eventually learned several ways to control bleeding and close wounds. Pressure was the immediate tool. Closure, dressings, and sometimes cautery became part of later documented medical practice. But even if the bleeding stopped, the wound could still kill you. Problem number 2 was surviving tomorrow. Open tissue is an invitation for infection. They could not culture a wound. They could not choose an antibiotic. But they did notice that some treatments seemed to produce better outcomes than others. Ancient Egyptian medical texts describe honey being placed on wounds. That sounds like folklore until you look at the chemistry. Honey has low available water. It is acidic. Many honeys also generate small amount of hydrogen peroxide through enzyme activity. Those conditions can make life difficult for many microbes. Ancient Egyptians did not know any of that. They only needed to notice a pattern. Wounds treated one way sometimes did better than wounds treated another way. Keep the method. Pass it on. That does not make kitchen honey a modern wound treatment. Medical-grade honey used today is specially prepared and sterilized for clinical use. A jar from the cupboard is not the same thing. The interesting part is the continuity of the idea. A treatment can work before anyone understands why it works. And this is where ancient wound care becomes less mysterious. Humans were not solving one giant medical problem. They were solving pieces. First, slow the bleeding. Then keep the wound together. Then protect it while the body repairs the damage. Then hope infection stays under control. Modern medicine separates those into different problems because we understand physiology, hemorrhage control, wound closure, infection prevention, debridement, antibiotics when needed. Ancient people did not have those categories. They just had outcomes. This person lived. This person did not. This method seemed to help. That one did not. And cultural memory did the rest. The person who survived a bad injury became evidence. The caretaker who found something useful could repeat it. A technique could spread through a group without anyone knowing the mechanism behind it. That may be one of the reasons social care mattered so much. Stopping your own bleeding while weak, frightened, and injured is hard. Having another person there changes the odds. Someone can press the wound. Someone can keep pressure on it when you cannot. Someone can carry you. Someone can bring water. Someone can keep you from moving when moving makes things worse. Someone can watch the wound after the crisis is over. Shanidar one does not tell us exactly who did any of those things, but long-term survival with major disability is difficult to explain without some level of support from other people. That is a part of prehistoric medicine bones can hint at, even when the actual treatment disappears. And there is another uncomfortable truth. Not everybody survived. Severe bleeding still killed people. Infections still killed people. Crushing injuries still killed people. A wound that damaged a major vessel, organ, or vital structure could be beyond anything available at the time. Ancient ingenuity did not erase biology. It only improved the odds. That is enough. Evolution does not require perfect medicine. A small improvement matters. Pressure that slows bleeding matters. A closed wound matters. A dressing matters. A treatment that reduces contamination matters. Another person staying beside you matters. Stack enough small advantages and some injuries that should have ended the story do not. So go back to the arm from the beginning. Blood running down your fingers. No ambulance. No emergency room. The first job is not complicated. Slow the leak. Buy time. After that, the problems arrive one by one. Close the wound. Protect it. Keep it clean enough. Survive the infection risk. Let the body repair what it can. Prehistoric humans did not have trauma surgery. They did not have sterile technique. They did not have antibiotics. And some wounds still healed. Shanidar's bones can tell us that. What they cannot tell us is whose hands were on the wound. Maybe that is the frustrating part of prehistoric medicine. The people who saved lives usually left no tools behind. Only survivors.